From the birthplace of American music here in Mississippi to the city of music abroad, Jackson native William Garfield Walker is making a name for himself in the classical music world. William began playing cello at the age of 13, and by the time he was 16, he was performing with the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra. Today, he's a conductor living in Vienna, following the footsteps of such great geniuses as Beethoven, Mozart, and Strauss. William, welcome home.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. It's so funny. I was reading a little bit about your time in Vienna, and you said the number one thing that drives you nuts is the food.
Well, yeah, well, okay, so I have to say, I do like Austrian food.
Austrian food's good.
I think it's great. I love Wiener Schnitzel.
Yes.
And, other Austrian dishes. But
it's not fried Wiener Schnitzel, though.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is?
It is. It's
yeah.
fried.
Oh, it's good. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do miss, red beans and rice, for example.
Right.
And, good Southern food.
So, and you can't even get the spices to cook it.
No, unfortunately. So I just bring them with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
exactly. See, now you have 2 suitcases going back, your clothes and a bunch of spices.
Exactly.
You did say, though, you did find a good Mexican restaurant there.
There is it's good Mexican restaurant, if you know what I mean.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I understand.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just worried about you there. I wanted to start off the show with that.
Yeah, thank you.
So now we know that you're eating okay.
Yeah.
Look, number one, I'm honored that we're sitting here talking to each other. You've had an incredible career so far. You're 26?
27 now.
27?
As of February.
You've aged. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. You've done a lot. You think so? Yeah. No, that's a good thing. You started out very early. At what age did you really start getting interested in music?
I really, like as a profession, or?
Yeah, just interested in it. Okay.
So I became really interested in music maybe in high school.
Okay.
And then I thought, well, perhaps I can do this as a profession actually while I was in the middle of my cello degree in bachelor's, because I started doing it and I was very interested in it. I wanted to do it, but I wasn't quite. I didn't know if I wanted to do that as a profession or if I might want to go into something else in the, after my bachelor's.
So it wasn't one of those cases where your mom dropped a cello in your crib when you were 6 months old?
No, that didn't happen.
No, that didn't happen.
Yeah,
but I will say this, though. Your mom did take you to concerts, and you thought, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. So one of my earliest childhood memories is going to a Halloween concert that the Mississippi Symphony gave.
Yeah.
I think I was dressed up as Batman or something like that. And
now, are there any pictures?
I think there might be a picture somewhere, but I don't want to show it to anybody.
Okay, in case your mom's listening.
Exactly. Yeah. And going to this concert and listening to the orchestra play, I really enjoyed hearing the orchestra play, and I enjoyed listening to the movie soundtracks when watching movies at home, and I went to Casey Elementary School, and we took a field trip to Thalia Hall to hear the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra play, and I really enjoyed hearing them play. And I thought, well, wow, I would like to play an instrument, or perhaps even wave my arms around in the middle of all of these musicians.
It's funny how that worked out. We'll say this though: if anybody ever says that arts in the schools don't matter, you are a prime example that they do.
Well, I think they're exactly wrong if they say that.
Right.
I mean, not mincing words at all, they're completely wrong.
Right.
Because the arts, not only does it make us better people, whether we go into them professionally or not.
Right.
And what I mean by better people is there have been studies on this.
Yeah.
It's not just me saying this. There have been scientific studies that say that it helps the development of the brain, not just listening to music, but actually, playing an instrument. It activates a different side of the brain.
It's like tied into math skills, too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so then you have also the mathematic component to it, how to divide the bars and the measures, and then also when you just talk about the financial side of it, the arts economy has, I can't remember the exact figure of it, but hundreds of billions. I want to say 800 billion or something in last year alone is what the arts contributed to the United States economy. It's really insane, and so to want to cut this out, it's like saying let's get rid of some really important sector of the economy. It's just ludicrous.
It's truly like eating your seed corn.
Yeah,
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
exactly.
What are people's reaction when they find out you're from Mississippi?
Well, it depends on where I am.
Right.
But in Europe, to be honest with you, they just say, well, okay, he's from America. They don't really know
Yeah.
the different states so well. In the North, they say, well, why don't you play a jazz instrument or something?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Or why aren't you a
Yeah.
writer? But yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always get it's whenever I travel around. I mean, people like they always want to hear. It's like you have shoes. Yeah, yeah, I do, but I don't have to wear them much.
Everyone does.
It really is. We don't have to wear them much though, because it's actually warm in the winter. You know,
Yeah.
just tell them stuff like that. So you're playing. How did you end up picking cello? Because that's a pretty cool story.
Well, when I first I joined the strings class at my school, and they came and they said, okay, so what instrument do you want to play? And I said, well, I want the biggest one you have. And
why?
and-
Why the biggest one?
Well, I was the tall kid, and so I wanted
Okay.
the big instrument. You know, when you're a kid like that, you always want to do things like that. And so they brought me a violin, which is actually the smallest string
Yeah.
instrument, and I said, no, I don't want that. Take it back. Bring me the biggest one. I didn't know the instrument names at the time, and so
Yeah.
they brought me a cello, and that was the largest instrument in the room. We didn't have a double bass, and so I started playing cello. And of course, I later found out it's not the biggest one, but it's, in my opinion, the best one.
But you were too invested at that point to give it up.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
your first private teacher was actually a bass.
Exactly. So
know.
it's funny how that happened.
Yeah.
So just by happenstance, after school, I also played in the band at school and played saxophone.
Okay.
And so I was waiting after school to go home after rehearsal, and I saw people coming in with string instruments that they didn't go to my school. And so I went up and said, "What are you doing here? And why are you here with these instruments?" And the Mississippi Youth Symphony was coming in, and so for auditions. And so I went in and I said, "Can I take an audition?" And I took an ad hoc audition there, and they said, "Well, you can join. You have to get a private teacher, and here's a list of private teachers." And I ended up studying with Richard Brown as my private cello teacher for the first 2 years of my private study, and then
Yeah.
also I was thinking about going to double bass, and then eventually I moved on to Bennett Randman, who was the principal cello of the Mississippi Symphony.
Bennett's education, what you learned from him was really more than just learning how to play. He really expanded your whole horizon with cello, didn't he?
He did, because the way that he approaches the cello is to take a little bit from many different people, many
Yeah.
of the greatest cellists in history. So I can remember sitting across like we are now. My cello here, his cello there, and he's saying, "Okay, William, you have to hold your fingers like this. This is the way Leonard Rose. This is the Leonard Rose school of holding it, and the bow you have to do like this, and it's Pablo Casals and whatnot." And so those are some of the largest things that I learned from him, and also sound production. We worked a lot on sound production.
I think about your career now as a conductor, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, because there's so much more to being a conductor than I ever thought when you were telling me a little bit about it. But that was the start of you kind of going into a deeper dive with music, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Because instead of thinking of it as just, oh, I can play the notes now, when, there's one thing where you play the notes and where you really are making music, where you're being expressive and playing it. And so that's what he wanted to get from me. He wanted me to be more expressive. When I came to him, I was just kind of raw,
Right.
and so he focused it a bit more.
So you were at MURA, the Power APAC program.
Exactly.
You played there. Then you made a big shift that made you leave Jackson.
Yeah, so
That was scary.
So I applied very, very last minute to
Yeah.
the Interlochen Arts Academy. And so I actually began my senior year of high school at MURA before transferring.
Like 2 weeks into it.
About 2 weeks into it to go to Michigan. And while I was there, I really had an opportunity to focus on music a lot.
Yeah.
It's an arts school after all. And so every day you have orchestra for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I can't remember exactly. It's been a minute. So that's where I was really able to focus a little bit more on music
Right.
for the first time.
Yeah, you were telling me earlier that you literally, the first concert of the day was 7 o'clock in the morning. That's kind of rude.
Yeah, we had rehearsal every day at
Concert rehearsal, yeah.
like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30, something like that. And so you wake up and you go to rehearsal.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time really great because you you are focused on what you want to do from the very early hours.
Well, that's a nice thing. I mean, but were you taking other classes too? Were you doing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
okay.
yeah. So I mean, so after that, I would go to math class, or to go to science class or something.
Well, at some point, you thought you were going to be an engineer, so you had to be pretty good at math. So.
Well, at one point, I did think about going into engineering. In fact, a lot of my family and friends thought I was going to do that in middle school, high school, also a little bit, because I was always interested in how things work. And actually, it kind of translates into being a conductor, because you have to know how everything works, not just how the instruments work, but how the compositional process works. And so it's interesting in that way.
One thing I love about your career is there's all these little moments where you meet people or you run into people that kind of push you into a different direction.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, there's a handful of people that's in moments, and that's why you're sitting here right now.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think that it's not just with me; it's with everybody. We meet somebody and we don't know how it's going to affect us until, it does. And we realize that it does affect us. Well,
you were surrounded, when you went to the high school, you were surrounded with very super talented classmates. That kind of made you want to rise to the next level, didn't it?
It did. I mean, of course, it always does. You want to not let your colleagues down.
Well,
so
you're
if
in
you're
high school. Yeah, you don't want anybody embarrassing you either, right?
Yeah, exactly. That too. You don't want to be embarrassed. But even in high school, with musicians, if you are playing in a string quartet and you're the worst one in the string quartet, then you're the problem, and everybody's going to let you know that you're a problem, whether you're in high school or you're a professional. I mean, you don't want to let them down in that way.
I know how they used to shame us in football. How did they do it? And do they make you go sit in a corner, or what they do with you?
Well, I mean, it's just a thing of you're not meeting the standard, and it's just teasing you a little bit. Well, you can't play those those notes or whatever.
So it makes you go back and go practice even harder.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things you always hear, like Malcolm Gladwell talked about 10,000 hours of practice before you're professional, and talked about the Beatles played for 10,000 hours before the 64, their big hit came out in 64. With you, though, I think it's you actually do something that's a little bit more important than just practicing. You really do what's called perfect practice.
I try to do as perfect as possible, because when you can go and play in the practice room or wherever for 12 hours and make no improvement at all.
Yeah.
And so it's my goal to even if I have just 20 minutes, to sit down and get the most out of the 20 minutes that I possibly can, and be as focused as possible. A great cellist, Mislav Rostropovich, a great Russian cellist of the last century, would actually not practice more than 2 hours a day, is what he said in some interviews, and that was because he was so focused on what he was doing that he was able to do it, to learn to be ready for the concerts.
Right. So it sounds like when you go into your practice, you pretty much already say, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 this. You plan out your practice probably as much as you would doing into a concert.
Well, I definitely have a goal that I want to achieve. So I know, okay, so I want to be able to play this more clearly, or when I'm reading a score, I know, okay, I want to do a harmonic analysis of this. So that's just basically knowing what is happening from a theoretical standpoint in the music. And so that's my goal of the score study session. And of course, you take breaks.
Oh yeah.
You take a few breaks here and there, so that your mind can refresh. Because also that's one thing that some people do that's wrong. They just practice and practice and practice and practice with no break, and they at some point are not making any more progress, even though they're repetitively doing things. There's a little bit of scientific way of analysis of how practice should go. Also.
Well, it's the old saying about insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting different results.
Exactly. So sometimes you have to just step away from it.
You literally are, and this kind of sounds corny, but you're a man of the world. But you were traveling even when you were a kid, and you went to Central America, and there's a great story with that trip.
Yeah, with the youth orchestra, with the Mississippi Youth Symphony, I traveled there. We went on tour to Costa Rica, and we played across a few different cities around the country from coast to coast. And we played really great music, and it was a great experience. Mm-hmm. But we had a chamber orchestra, so it was small enough that the conductor of our orchestra read everybody's name in the orchestra to the public at the end. It wasn't just the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra, it was you know, this is John Smith and Mary Doe and, you know, and William Walker. And when they made it to William Walker, everybody started laughing. And I was trying to figure out, why are you laughing? I haven't done anything funny. And everybody was in the orchestra was trying to figure out. So it wasn't just me, even though I was maybe a little self-conscious being a teenager. And then finally, after the third or fourth city of doing this, the tour guide who was with us said, oh, it's because you're named after somebody who has a very infamous history with our country.
Yeah, a guy from Tennessee that came down and tried to take over the country.
Exactly.
So they thought you were back.
Yeah,
they were a little nervous.
Well,
you're like, from Mississippi. That's close to Tennessee.
It's close to Tennessee.
Yeah, that could be bad.
Yeah.
But that's been one of the real advantages of what you've been doing. You've been able to travel the world.
Oh well, I mean that's a real blessing.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's something I'm extremely thankful to have the opportunity to do.
So when you're getting out of high school, how did you pick your college? How did you decide where you're going to continue your career?
Well, I did master classes with a few different teachers at universities, and it's just because when you go to school, you want to go for the teacher. You don't want to go necessarily for the name.
Or for the football games.
Or for the football games.
Right.
If you're going into music, you have to go for the teacher because you need to go to the person that's going to take you to the next step of your development. And so that's how I ended up doing that. I ended up graduating from the Chicago College of Performing Arts, and I ended up finding my teacher this way, not by doing a master class with them first, but by looking for cellos. I needed to get a new cello, and I'd been searching for a while, and finally I met him, and he had one, and I tried it, and I asked him for for a lesson, and he invited me to audition for his class.
Wow.
And so I was accepted, and I ended up studying with a member of the Chicago Symphony, which was for me, not looking back, it was great for my development. Of course, I knew it at the time also, but also, to meet him at first was really great because as a child, I listened to Chicago Symphony recordings, and it was one of my favorite orchestras, one of them, and to study with somebody from these recordings was just great. Fabulous.
There were moments when because you're now in a situation where you get to meet some of your heroes. Do you just sit there and just go, you met John Williams.
I met John Williams, yeah.
Obviously created most of the great movie scores in the 20th and early 21st century now.
Yeah.
What was that like, sitting across from him?
Well, I met him after a rehearsal at Tanglewood.
Yeah.
And he was very generous to, speak to me a little bit and about. I asked him some questions about how did he come up with different ideas for movies and for movie music, and about how he is as a composer, because he composes outside of the movie music as well. And it was very interesting. And it's been very interesting meeting other people as well and learning, because I'm still very much in the early stages of my career. I'm still learning and trying to grow, and so you just talk to everybody you can and try to learn as much as possible.
At some point there, you went from being just a cello player, which you still are. You still play.
I still play.
But you just said, I want to become a conductor. What lit that fire?
Well, the fire, what lit the fire and how I began are maybe two different questions. So I began playing cello, not playing cello, I began to conduct in high school by happenstance, like most things. Actually, I was playing cello in the orchestra, in the conductor's orchestra. If you're a conductor, you have to have an instrument to practice with, and that means an orchestra. And so the students at Interlochen, the conducting students, were conducting the orchestra, and I was laughing a little bit, maybe, being a high school kid. And the teacher said, okay, you do it. At the very end, he said, now you get up and do it. And I got up and did it, and I made a complete idiot of myself because I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
But he did take me into his class, and he gave me an opportunity to learn a little bit from him. But I didn't pursue it seriously until much later. I did take some lessons with Dwight Altman, who's still a mentor of mine. I still call him up and say, well, what do you think about this situation and in the music, or what do you think about this? And I still get advice from him. But it wasn't until I made it to maybe my junior year of undergraduate that I said, okay, I want to try to do a summer institute to learn how to conduct. And so, of course, you have to send a video, and I had no conducting video, so I put together a group of friends.
Yeah.
And we recorded Wagner's Siegfried Ido. It's for 13 instruments, very beautiful piece. And we did a few rehearsals before the recording session. And afterwards, people said, okay, we want to keep this going. This was a lot of fun. And I said, okay, fine, I want to do it too. And so that's how an orchestra was birthed, actually. And that's where I guess that also lit a fire, because now I'm conducting an orchestra and doing concerts with them. And so that was really great.
Yeah, you even had to hire your own replacement when you left it.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, we had a search and passed it off.
Talk about conducting a little bit, because I think most people were like me, probably learned about conducting from Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
The great, as he's Leopold, they thought he was Leopold, and long-haired hair, Chuck Jones, 1949. I can tell you the cartoon exactly. But the way you explained it to me, there is a lot more to conducting than just standing there and doing this.
Yeah, so when you're standing there and doing this, and the audience sees that is just it's not even the tip of the iceberg, it's the very top of the tip of the iceberg. If there's a man standing on top of the iceberg, it's that man, actually. Yeah. So what goes on besides that is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's many hours of score study, studying the harmonic analysis of a piece, trying to understand how the composer put the piece together, what he wants to show to the audience, what emotion does he want to give, perhaps it's he wants to show a scene, he wants to tell a story, like Daphnis and Chloe with Ravel, for example. So it's trying to understand that and doing a lot of reading to try to figure out what was going on in the composer's life at the time, and what was going on in the world around him. And so really there's a lot of academic study that goes into conducting. It's that you're really trying to figure out the most, and then finally you make it to the rehearsal. That's all before you've even stepped on the podium to make it to the rehearsal, to conduct the first rehearsal of the piece. And then it's hard work, because you're trying to unite 125 people into one way of playing. And after that, then you make it to the performance. Right.
Of course, you do a lot of guest conducting too, so you got to walk in and do all that in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, so it's the same process with score study, whether you're the main conductor or just a guest or even assistant. But then when you make it to the rehearsal, then if you don't know the orchestra, it's, you're trying to get the trust of the orchestra. Right. Because, you have highly trained professional musicians, and they have to trust you.
As you say, it's like a first date.
It's like a first date. And, can I trust this person or not? And then, hopefully they say yes, and then, you can continue with the work. And
well, judging by your career, I'd say a lot of people trust you. That's good. That's working out pretty well so far.
I've been very lucky.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about when you're trying to get inside the composer's head and what's going on. That's why living in Vienna is really helpful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you joked, you said there was 5 Beethoven museums?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Beethoven slept here.
I also make a joke that you throw a rock and you find a piece of musical history there, because they have so many different museums, places where the composers lived.
Right.
I mean, you have Beethoven houses, as you said, maybe 4 or 5 of them in just Vienna. You have Mozart House. You have, you go to the Vienna State Opera, where Gustav Mahler was the conductor. He was the chief conductor. The building is still there, and they still perform, and with the same orchestra that Wagner conducted the premiere performances of some of his operas.
Oh, wow.
And then you have, it's just a rich musical tradition, and so I've been very fortunate not just to be there, but to learn from, going to rehearsals of these great orchestras that are in the city, and going to performances, and, talking to musicians, and just trying to absorb as much as possible.
It sounds like for you, education's a lifelong journey.
I think for every musician, it should be.
Should be.
It should be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely on that. One thing I like about you, and I've been impressed, is when you came back home and you did the concert for hurricane relief. You really do believe in giving back, don't you?
I do, but first I want to say that I didn't do that alone.
Well, I know there was other people, but you were part of it. I mean, you didn't have to do it.
No.
So, but you like to do that, and you like to give back to students, and like to do that also.
Yeah.
That's pretty rewarding.
Well, it is. Well, that's. I think that being a musician, when you're doing it from the right, with the right motives, it is an act of giving. You know, you're not just playing for yourself. I don't think that is how it should be. I think you should be giving, you know, joy to the audience, or you know, if it's a piece that has anguish in it, you should be giving them anguish.
Give us some anguish.
But give them some type of emotion.
Right,
you know,
right.
you know, you should be You should, if they walk away from the performance and they think, oh, okay, well, that was it. Let's go get dinner. Then you've failed. I think that they should walk away and say, oh, well, I really enjoyed that. Or even if they walk away and say, well, I didn't agree with how he did this.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's also okay. Like I don't want to be neutral. That's my thought. And so I want to give them some type of impression.
You know, strangely enough, that's a lot like editorial cartooning.
Oh yeah.
You don't care if they're mad or not. You just want them to think.
Exactly.
But you're just trying to move them. What's going on with you now? What are you up to? What are you going to be up to in the near future?
Well, so I'm still doing some guest conducting. I'm currently writing some music. Also, I'm in the middle of writing an opera, actually.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm writing that.
That's right. You've written some music too.
I've written a few orchestral pieces, a violin piece, and a few things.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come see us. I know taking a little time away from your mom. I know, and I want to say thank you to her for letting us have some of your time too. But congratulations and best luck with your career.
All right. Thank you very much.